important was hanging in the balance. Was there really a septic tank? Let me tell you something. The south of Italy, or was it just a hole in the ground? Welcome to episode 12 of how I bought my dream beach villa in the south of Italy. Ciao ragazzi, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Anise, and I'm an American living in London who you are just catching in the tail end of her series on finding her dream beach villa in Puglia. If you're not so new here, guys, we have some decisions to make. What we're gonna do in this episode is we're gonna do a very quick recap of all the villas that we've seen so far, the circumstances and conditions that we need to factor into our decision. So, taking us way back to the very beginning, there were a couple of villas that were, for lack of a better term, non-viable. We're talking about the villa that we saw in episode 2, which is the first villa. We also have the small villa that Anna saw on our behalf once everything had fallen through with the first villa. And we also had the ghosted villa, which is the property that we absolutely fell in love with, but mid-negotiations, the owners basically just disappeared on us. We also had the no-go house, which was the first villa that we saw on our marathon weekend of villa viewings. But just a few hours after that viewing, we learned that this property, although it came with a full second land plot adjacent to the house, we would be severely restricted and limited in doing anything with that extra land plot because this property fell within the 300-meter restriction zone, which makes any kind of material work happening within 300 meters of the shoreline very difficult to get approvals for. So considering that these 4 villas essentially were off the table at this point in our search, we're basically choosing from 8. So the last 8 that we saw on this marathon weekend. First up, the Rose House. Now, this house was a vibe. Things it had going for it, it had a lot of character. That dusty pink tile, green shutters. It was also the least expensive house that we were looking at. And it was a good size. It had 3 bedrooms, the ceilings were high, you felt the spaciousness when you were inside the house, and it had a decent flow. Now, the downsides. While it was the cheapest house, it was also going to take significant time and money to make it what we would want it to be. The road that this house was on was not amazing, and this house suffered from having very little greenery. The whole outdoor space was fully paved. But that wasn't the biggest issue. If you recall, it had a water well, but that water well was dangerously close to the septic tank. Next up, after the Rose House, we saw the Old Man's House. Now, the Old Man's House really gave me good vibes. What this villa had really going for it, a stunning back terrace with a beautiful pergola, great outdoor space for enjoying the Puglia weather. It also had a really good roof, and it was a very easy walk to the beach. What it didn't have going for it, the second unit in the back was a little bit dingy, and there were also a bunch of question marks around whether that was legal or not. Although the main house had 3 bedrooms, it only had 1 bathroom, and the communal living areas of the indoor space were going to need a bit of a refurb just to kind of modernize them and make it a space that would be very comfy and cozy and homey for us. Following the Old Man's House, we saw the Garden House. Pros of the Garden House: it had a lot of character, and simply put, it was beautiful. With its arches and beautiful verandas and lovely garden outdoor spaces, this property, like the Old Man's House, also gave very good vibes. It felt very lived in, like a happy family had been living there over the years. This property was an easy walk to the beach, essentially a straight shoot, and you are on a beautiful sandy beach in 10 minutes. And this villa also came with a separate annex attached to the main house that had an additional bathroom, kitchenette, and separate bedroom. Now, what was not so amazing about this villa, the price tag. It was the most expensive villa that we had seen the whole weekend. The damage on the ceilings revealed a significant leak problem that would need to be remedied. And overall, this villa was going to need a lot more work than we had originally anticipated, considering that the listing photos made the villa look very new and fresh. But next, with the rain coming down on us, we went to view the Olive Grove house. Or should I say, the surprise Olive Grove house, for those of you who watched episode 8. The pros of this villa: the area was pretty tranquil, pretty quiet. There was plenty of land, ample green space. And this villa came with an opportunity of a lifetime to be an olive oil magnate in the south of Italy for whoever wanted to buy it and pick all those olives and make some olive oil. Now, the downsides of this property. Honestly, I don't know how else to put it other than the house was pretty awful. It was small, there was no sea view, and although I listed this as a perk, it could also be a con, the fact that there was so much land that you would then have to cultivate and take care of. And this villa was also expensive. Immediately after the Olive Grove house, we went on to see the brothel house. Much like the Olive Grove house, the brothel house gave you the opportunity of a lifetime to be the madame of the house, if you know what I mean. This villa also had very, very beautiful facades. A really lovely design on the exterior walls of the house, plus the floral landscaping across the pergolas. The terraces were also very large and contributed to that lovely Mediterranean atmospheric feel for the exterior of the house. This was also a very easy walk to the beach. That said, the interior was not so great because it had been chopped up into so many little apartments, but there were also a lot of question marks about the legalities of many aspects of the villa, including if all of those rooms were actually updated on the cadastral map or would need to be updated and legalized. The villa itself was also very large. Sometimes more is not always more, and a big property like that would also require a lot of work to take care of it and maintain. And lastly, the price tag was not so little. So then we had the sunken place, which invited you in with a large welcoming front terrace and beautiful vegetation. Price-wise, this was one of the more economical villas, and it was a very easy walk direct to the beach. However, this property did come with a major damp issue. Since its property lot was sitting lower in the ground than the street, this property didn't have any roof access, which at this point I had kind of started taking for granted because the vast majority of villas that we saw had roof access. Overall, this flow, this layout was not the most desirable, very boxy, just one central box living space with little rooms just off the perimeter. And this kitchen was very small and tight. Following the sunken place, we have the cute villa, which, as its nickname implies, had very good vibes. It had spectacular sea views from the roof. It had a combination of paved areas and lovely green space with olive trees and lemon trees. This property had a really nice flow in its layout. It was listed at a modest price point compared to the vast majority of other villas that we were looking at, and it had a very cute and cozy back veranda for dining al fresco and just hanging out with friends and family. It had a great roof with beautiful views over the Ionian Sea. But a big downside with this villa is that it had a structural issue with its roof, which would mean that the roof would likely need to be fully redone, which of course would only really bump up the listing price. This villa would also require some updating of the cadastral map in order to be legal for a sale. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we had the castle. The castle offered this very grand, impressive feeling once you first entered the property. The lot for this villa was quite spacious, quite big, giving it a lot of potential for future works and things that you maybe could consider adding to the property, like a swimming pool or other kind of outdoor living structures. There was a pretty solid irrigation system already put in place for the vegetation and a pump system that allowed the house to use the water from the water well that was already on the lot. And overall, this property just had quite a strong, unique identity, making it not like any of the other villas that we had seen thus far. The downside with this villa, though, is that it felt quite remote in its placement. It wasn't the easiest or most straightforward walk to the beach. The interiors felt very boxy and squished, in a stark contrast to the grand, open, spacious feeling that you have when you first enter the lot. Changing this, of course, would mean a significant time and financial investment, but this villa was also already starting at a pretty high price point. And so there we go, there's our recap. How was that? A good refresher of your memory of everything that we've seen so far? good, because these are the considerations that we were taking with us into our meeting with Anna and Antonio and the whole crew a few hours after we viewed the castle villa, so that we could put our heads together and get a strong sense of what steps would need to be taken for us to put a viable offer on a property before the weekend was over. So after breaking for lunch, we reconvened at a cafe in the late afternoon. Bay and I made a list of our top 5 villas with questions and considerations we wanted to discuss with Anna and Antonio, so we could figure out which villa should we make an offer on and at what price point should we make that offer. So, in no particular order, our top 5 villas were the Rose House, the Old Man's House, the Garden House, the Cute House, and the Castle. The biggest things that we discussed with Antonio and Anna about each of these properties essentially were the costs of the work that were going to be required for the different properties. For instance, baseline, all of these properties were going to need like another paint job, and they were going to probably need some electrical work. A lot of these houses were built in the 70s. They weren't even legal when they were built. And so now, some 50 odd years later, a lot of things were no longer up to code. So we wanted to get a sense of numbers in terms of painting, electrical work from Antonio, who's an engineer and who also has a lot of experience in the construction industry, so that we can compare those numbers against our budget and the listing prices and make some calculations. Some of these properties, we also had questions on what would need to be updated, for instance, at the municipality on the cadastral map in order for the property to be in a legal state for it to be sold. Now, Antonio told us that usually these documents, either verifying or not verifying the official status of things, typically aren't secured until after an offer is made, but he would do what he could to get more information so that, we weren't necessarily wasting our time on properties that were going to be an uphill battle of getting like everything from A, B, C to Z legalized in order for the sale to happen. Considering that Arnis and I would not only be using this villa for ourselves, but since we also would be setting it up for rental income, having something like the certificate of habitability was going to be very, very important for us. So we also didn't really want to waste our time making an offer on a house where the certificate of habitability was going to be something that was hanging in the balance. We really dived into things deep here. We were in this cafe, I think probably for like 4 hours. Let me tell you something. The south of Italy is not a fast place. It's not a speedy place. Things are done with people taking their time. Yeah. But it was good. When you are making a decision this big and this important, you want to feel like you really are getting in there, getting in the dirt, and you know what's going on, right? So in a lot of ways, I am grateful for this Italian way of doing things, where we're just having long conversations about all the possibilities and hypotheticals, because this is definitely what helped us make a decision. So for instance, Bay is a swimmer. Not that every property lot that we looked at even could manage this, but Bay was really set on seeing whether or not we could build a pool in like half these villas. So, Antonio was drawing up all kinds of hypotheticals for us. For instance, if the castle were going to take a pool, where that could go and how that could be set up. The garden house didn't really have space for a normal pool, but maybe there was space for a lap pool along the side of the house. Like, we really got into the thick of it. At this point in our viewings, we also had seen quite a few villas that had a 2-family setup. So a main house with a secondary house in the back, or an annex, for instance, in the case of the Old Man's House and the Garden House. The castle, which was very high on Bay's list, had a very big lot. So we were curious about, okay, what if we wanted to create a second unit on this property, a smaller kind of guest house? Where on the property could we put that? And while it could be doable, Antonio let us know, even within a private property itself, there has to be a minimum amount of meterage between any new structures that are built and the perimeter of the property. A regulation like that led us to start questioning how viable it would be if we wanted to set up a second structure on the castle. A pool would probably be more viable than a full second unit. Antonio did give us ballpark figures for certain things that we had questions about. For instance, in the case of the Cute House, that property was going to require structural work. Could be anywhere in the ballpark of 25,000 euros upwards. The Rose House, which was the least expensive house we looked at, minimum anywhere from 30 to 40,000. in terms of putting in an Imhoff tank, rewiring the whole house, doing a check of the roof and making sure that that was in solid condition, getting a proper water tank put into the ground, because remember, this property had a water well that was sitting not too far away from just the sewage hole. So Rose House would be starting with a minimum baseline of at least 40,000 euros worth of work and beyond, you know. In this meeting, we really dove into a lot of the hypotheticals, crunched our numbers to see, could we make a viable formal offer on a property before heading back to London at the end of this marathon weekend of viewings? And did we? I think you'll just need to tune into next week's finale to find out. We had one final wonderful meal with Giorgio's family, and off we were to the airport to make our journey back to London town. Now that we've had this little refresher, don't at all hesitate to let me know what your top pick would be. And as per usual, do not forget to hit the subscribe button. Guys, we are one episode away from finding out which of all these villas turned out to be my dream beach villa in the south of Italy. I cannot wait to take you on the journey next week. I'm looking forward to hearing what all of you guys think of my final choice. Until next time, ci vediamo. Ciao.